Have you ever been given information that turned out to be wrong? I'm sure you have. I recall a time when I thought I had won a promotion only later to find out that it was given to someone else. It was painful. Now, that may not sound like a big deal. And in the grand scheme of life, you're probably correct. But what if that wrong information had been something to do with my health? Getting a medical diagnosis can be life-changing. And in today's episode, my guest shares his experience of being misdiagnosed and how that shaped his life positively and negatively. But before we get into all that, I just want to remind you, if you're interested in raising your standards as a father, a husband, an entrepreneur, I encourage you to participate in our Band of Brothers group mentorship program. We're a group of ordinary guys striving towards living extraordinary lives. You can find us at the Awakened Man Training Academy at members.theawakenedman.net. And with that, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of the Awakened Man movement and your host, Alan DeMonso. Let me ask you a couple of questions before we get started. When was the last time you received information only to find out that it was wrong? And how did you cope with that once you found out? All of us will eventually deal with receiving wrong information. Now, this is not misinformation. It's actually wrong. And how we respond to that information will shape our lives for better or for worse. Well, today, my guest shares a story about a decision he had to make that would ultimately shape his life. So allow me to introduce my guest. Adam Wells is a former NHL Zamboni driver turned personal development coach. Adam leads with mindset and fitness. Having lived through a false diagnosis, Adam had to choose between giving into hopelessness and depression or facing adversity head on. He chose the latter. Welcome to the show, Adam. How are things today, brother?
Hey, Alan, thanks for having me. It couldn't be better. And I just want to say that I think that what you're doing with your podcast is a great thing. I think you're putting together a catalog of stories and experiences that are going to benefit men for years to come. And there's not enough people doing it. So I want to say thanks for that. But yeah, no, I'm great. And how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. And, it's nice to finally get to a point in my life where I'm truly living my purpose. And I know that's some of the work that you're doing as well. And we're going to dive into that today as well. But as you know, here at the Awakened Man and on the Revolutionary Man podcast, I always talk about all of us being on a hero's quest. And you had quite a hero's quest as well. So tell us about that time when you had to make that decision, the one I mentioned a little bit earlier. How were you able to come to it? And how did that experience shape you into the man you are today and the work that you're doing?
Right. So that diagnosis that came to me in 2013 was a false HIV diagnosis. And so you have to imagine that as an early 20-year-old that, that shatters your worldview pretty quickly, right? I mean, and somebody who's never abused any type of hard drugs, no intravenous drugs, always taken great care of myself, was an athlete growing up for the longest time and still am, never stopped being an athlete, but, prided myself in taking care of my physical fitness and well-being. Getting that news was completely devastating. I had plans for my future that I had to completely bypass because, I just had this bomb dropped on me, and I'm not going to lie. You have no idea what you're going to do. Right. So it's like this moment where you're shell shocked. And, when you watch movies, when, they get into a car accident or when somebody gets a cancer diagnosis and then, you hear the audio kind of go quiet and blurry and there's that ringing in the background. That's a real thing, like that. I experienced that. And I don't know if I experienced that as a result of having seen it in movies and like defaulting to some subconscious program, but that's what happened. And, as soon as I heard that diagnosis, everything else that came afterwards was, I can't even recollect what was said by the doctor. I got some information and then I just proceeded on down the path of like, okay, what's next with dealing with this? Right.
Yeah.
And so part of that was, deciding, well, I went home actually, and I think I didn't get out of bed for like a week. Like I did get up to go to the bathroom, so on and so forth, but I just remember, you know, screaming at the top of my lungs into my pillow and, you know, keeping everything bottled up inside for the longest time, never told anybody. And, you know, I just woke up and realized, you know, like I have to deal with this. You know, I've never been a quitter. And it seemed like an insurmountable problem, but I just was, you know, in bed one morning looking up at the ceiling and I thought to myself, well, like, screw it, you know, like I have to move forward. You know, I'm not going to roll over and die. And it's not in me to do that. So let's just start picking up the pieces one step at a time and figure out what we're going to do. And so what I decided, although it sounds crazy, but like this is what I decided to get me out of bed and to keep moving was I'm going to cure this thing, is what I said to myself. And then so the first thing I did was I got dressed, you know, I had a bunch of water and went straight to the gym. And, you know, I always felt fantastic going to the gym. You know, I realized that like, hey, I'm not sick, I'm not dying. Like I'm still like physically at my peak. And I'm going to the gym and I'm going to get a workout in, I'm going to feel good, get some clarity, and then approach this from a calmer place. Mm. And it's kind of strange how the world works sometimes. You know, it's serendipitous, and you know, some people don't want to, or I don't know, that they tend to veer away from anything that might sound new agey or anything like that, right? But I mean, it was serendipitous in the sense that I heard a quote that really kind of like it was just cemented in me that the universe had my back and that I made the right decision to get out of bed. And the quote is, the hallmark of a healthy mind is an unyielding willingness to face the truth, no matter how dire. And, you know, it rattled me. I was just like, I can't believe that, you know, like I'm hearing this and that it's resonating with me so clearly. And all that's to say that, you know, if I had chosen any other, like, I mean, you could have had an easy out. You would have had a justifiable reason to have an easy out. And the thought crept into my mind so briefly that it scared me. I was like, this is not me, you know, and that is not, I don't want to go in that direction. That's not where I'm going. I'm going in the other direction. I don't care how hard this road is in front of me. I'm going to figure it out as I go.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the medical team that I was dealing with was fantastic, like through and through, like so supportive, and, you know, answered all the questions that I had to the best of my ability. And so basically what ends up happening is you go to this clinic and they tell you what the process is going to be, which is that they're going to continue to draw blood samples. And this happens, you know, with a lot of frequency, right? And so my blood results came back, and there's this thing where they call it testing undetectable. So you technically have still tested positive for HIV, but you have undetectable levels of the virus in your blood, which sounds kind of like counterintuitive. It sounds like, okay, well, if it's undetectable, then how do I have it? But they ended up, they put you in a category of something that's called slow progressors. And basically they said, well, like, I mean, you're really physically fit right now. You're healthy. We're just going to continue to monitor your blood labs and your biomarkers and so on and so forth. And so long as you stay healthy, like, you don't have to take any medication. And I was very averse to taking medication. I didn't want to, because I'd heard, you know, horror stories of, you know, people who were taking like AZT back in the day and how that was, you know, a failed cancer drug, and it caused a lot of people to, you know, become unnecessarily ill. And so I was just like, you know, I don't want to die a slow death by taking toxic medication. And, you know, like it was just this whole other landscape that I had to navigate, and to stay true to what I believed in and to what my gut was telling me was kind of very difficult. Right.
Yeah.
But I was also fortunate in the fact that, like, you know, I didn't have to take any medication. They didn't recommend that I take anything. And so I was like, okay, perfect. This is good. Now I get to execute my plan on the side, and then I get to come in, get my blood work done, and find out where I stand. And as long as I get the green light from the doctors, then, you know, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And it kind of became a bit of a contest, you know, like I was like, okay, well, I'm going to see how good my blood labs are going to be this month as opposed to last month. And so fast forward to 2015, May 2015, I go in for another checkup, except for this one feels a little bit different. And they sit me down in an office, and essentially they tell me that they think that they maybe made a mistake. And, you know, I don't know how common this is, because sorry, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but they sat me down and they told me, we think that there may have been a mistake because you've been undetectable for X period of time, which is, close to, we're at 2 years, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we're not seeing any progression. So we think that something's amiss here, right? So what ended up happening was they sent my blood labs to a national Canadian lab, and they did a molecular test and a few other tests and basically confirmed the fact that it was a false diagnosis. And the reason why I was testing positive on the Western blot remained unknown. So they don't know why, but they do know for sure that it was a false diagnosis. So, I just chalk it up to the fact that like everybody's so different biologically. And we do know that false positives occur. Like it's known, it's documented, and it's not uncommon. It does happen.
Yeah.
And so, for me, that was like the biggest relief of all time. It was like I got my life back. And, at the time it felt like, it felt like, 2 years felt like forever. It felt like that was my entire life, was trying to figure out, what is the healthiest thing that I can do for my body today? Like, is it having green smoothies? Is it having juices? Is it like being vegan, which I tried and is absolutely the worst thing I ever did to my health. So, but I mean, I was just open to anything and everything, so long as there was like a scientific backing, so long as like, it made sense to me to try it. I wanted to try it. Right.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for this diagnosis, I would never have gone down that road. I would never have opened my mind to possibilities that, let's say, for example, qigong, like, traditional Chinese medicine might be able to heal somebody, or that, frequencies play a role, or that stress plays a role, or that even just what we're imagining plays a role. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I heard a quote from Albert Einstein that said that imagination is everything. It's the preview of life's coming attractions, right? And I don't think he just meant that as like, this sounds nice and, focus on a goal and maybe you'll achieve it. I think he meant that we actually manifest things into our reality.
100%.
And so it's kind of a combination of, like anything and everything that I could apply to my life to make myself healthier and better. And so basically I get this news that I don't have HIV and that I can proceed on as normal. And I completely just shut off that one part of my life. I was like, I'm done. I'm not going to see doctors anymore, because at the same time, as much as I had a great team, I had an inherent distrust of the medical system at this point, because how could I get tested almost every month for 2 years plus and still test positive for something that, kills people, and something that like is so devastating to hear that you have this diagnosis. And then not only that, I mean, it wasn't just like having to like come to terms with the fact that like you're living with something that you believe you have, that you think is going to shorten your lifespan, that's going to cause you to die poorly. And then also on top of that, I started thinking about like, well, is there any chance that I might have passed this on to somebody else? Right. And then so you start worrying about other people that you may have affected, and then you have to deal with that. And you have to figure out a way to be able to get up in the morning and say, hey, look, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything on purpose. And if you did, like, how are you going to fix it? So it's tough because you're trying to tell yourself it's not your fault. And at the same time, you feel like it's your fault. Right. And then there's the dread of not knowing. Right. But yeah, I mean, so that's kind of how it all started, and I guess the end result was that it tempered my resiliency. It tempered my mind to the point where I was like, if I can get through this, which I did, and if I can, like, I was dealing with it so well that like my doctors couldn't really, like, they didn't really get it. They're like, this guy shouldn't be in this mental state that he's in. Right.
Yeah.
And I found a way to, I found that suffering is a choice, and I didn't choose to suffer. Right. And despite the fact that I was dealing with all this crap, I was just like, I'm not going to suffer. And so it was a choice. And really, like, to distill it all into that, it was just a simple choice. And then I learned about myself is that I can handle any adversity. I don't care what it is.
Yes. Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Wow. What an incredible story. I just was writing a ton of notes here, just everything you were saying there. And right off the hop, you talked about, you had this plan, your life plan, everything was all set up, right? And then I was thinking of the Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's pretty much what happened to you, right? It's just
Absolutely,
like, bang, you're punched in the face. And now what are you going to do? And I just think that, when we get these bouts of adversity that's thrown at us, how we respond and how we get to the ultimate end game of it really determines. And for me, I think I used to say that it shapes our character, but I think shaping happens after it reveals it. And because I really believe that we don't truly know who we are as men until we get punched in the face, until we get that adversity thrown at us, and we think we know how we're going to respond, and then we're in it. And I'm really glad that you're, really authentic and honest about the struggle in the beginning, right? It was basically like the 4 stages of grief or of dying, right? It's the denial, the bargaining, the anger, and then finally ultimately coming to the decision that, I'm going to face this thing head on and go ahead and do that. And yet in that, there's still moments of doubt, right? And still moments of fear, because you're not sure what's going to happen for you. And so I thought that was really powerful with what you said. And then you talked about how suffering is a choice. And I think we're on this earth to experience all types of emotions and all types of things. And suffering is one of those things that we're all going to experience, but how long we stay in it is definitely a choice. And so I'm really grateful that you brought that up and you made that statement, because I think for a lot of us, we can, based on our coping mechanisms, it's more comfortable to be suffering and staying in that mode than it is to deal with it. And it takes, like you said, that resilience. And I know a lot of your work is really about dealing with or creating a shatterproof mindset. And so I just want to ask the question that I had wrote down as you were going through stuff is, through this whole 2 years, were you carrying this burden on your own shoulders, like to yourself? Did you let anybody in that circle to help you? How were you managing that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just one thing before it slips my mind about suffering. I mean, it's kind of funny because I deliberately seek out pain, like in the sense of like pushing myself in the gym, and like I feel that is how we experience personal growth, or maybe you can initiate personal growth in that regard, right? And so when I say suffering is a choice, I mean that you don't have to stay there. I mean, we're all going to experience suffering. It's inevitable, but you don't have to stay there, and you can look at it for what it is, and then try to flip it on its head and look at it from the perspective of, how can I use this in a positive light? How can I use this to propel myself forward? But like at the end of the day, it is a choice, and you don't have to stay there.
Yeah.
And how I dealt with it at first, really was on my own, and it got to the point where like things were bubbling up, and I went out for a night to celebrate a buddy's birthday, and I ended up having a few more than I wanted. And actually, I did want them, but I didn't have the intended result. Like I was enjoying my night, and then a few whiskeys, and then I just all of a sudden started to feel all this pain and emotion bubbling up. And I went to my parents' place, and my mom, she could tell something was up, and she was concerned. And then, yeah, like, I mean, honestly, I had to tell my parents something that I was so ashamed to tell them. And so, like, I had no idea how they were going to respond. And yeah, it was tough, honestly. Like, I mean, I actually didn't think that I was going to feel a little bit emotional about it, but I am. But, I think the reason why is because, you think that you're going to get rejected. You think that, you're going to get, disowned or whatever. I don't know. All these crazy thoughts jump to your mind, right?
Yeah.
And I'm so blessed and so fortunate to have, amazing parents. And, like, I just remember my mom just brought me in for a big hug, and my dad was there, and it was the same deal. And, it was tough, but, it made it so much easier afterwards, because, like, that you're not alone. And a lot of times, okay, people are out there dealing with whatever it is they have to deal with. And, they think they're alone, and you're not alone.
Yeah.
Like, people are not alone. And it's such a sad thing when people don't reach out for help, or when people don't, like, we're here to help one another. And, there are things that happen to people that they didn't ask for, that they don't deserve. And so, you know, you just have to be cognizant of the fact that, there are people out there that are willing to help you, and there are people out there who genuinely care, whether that be a friend or a family member, or, sometimes it's a complete stranger. Sometimes just flashing somebody a smile in a not creepy way in an elevator might brighten their day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I think that we live in a world today where, we're so consumed by our cell phones and social media, and like, living to impress our neighbor, that like, it's like, where's the human connection gone? And I think that we need to kind of revert back to an older time where, we valued physical face-to-face connection more. And that's sort of kind of a little bit of a tangent there. So, but I guess to answer your question, yeah, my family was there for me, and
Right on.
and I'm so fucking well. Sorry, I
Okay,
tend
brother.
to throw the occasional F-bomb out there, but I was happy that they were there, and I'm blessed to have great family. So that's the answer to that one.
Right on, man. Right on. And I thank you for being so vulnerable and willing to share, and especially some emotion in there, because I think it's important.
Yeah.
A lot of times as guys, we make up all these stories, all these things, reasons of why we can't share, because it's only me, that I'm not worthy, whatever these stories that we come up with. And I still struggle with that. Even last week was a pretty tough week for me, and was really struggling with stuff. And it took a while. Well, it took almost a week to really shake myself out of it. And that's why I wanted to find out, like, when you recognize, and maybe not all of us have a parent that we can go to, but we have people in our life that care enough about us that if you went to them, they'd listen and be there to support us. And as guys, we just need to do that more. There's no weakness in that. There's actually a ton of strength in being able to let somebody in and know where you're at, and so they can support you. And I think it's something that more and more men are doing today. And because in the end, whether, no matter what kind of guy you are, we all want to be accepted. I want to feel at some life that I'm going to be accepted. And when you have a diagnosis like you had, sometimes that feeling of being alienated can be pretty strong, right? And are you going to be accepted? And will people talk to me? And, you were, talking about, now that considering now who are the people I'm with, and like all the stuff. And we'll do that in lots of different environments. So what's your take on that?
Well, it's not just, me who is out there at this period in time who is dealing with, a stigma, associated with a diagnosis. You can carry a stigma associated with anything. Like maybe you have an insecurity about, the way maybe you got curly hair and you don't like it, and you think that you're going to be judged because you got curly hair because you're short. And guys, sometimes we measure ourselves in very strange ways. Sometimes, like, you think that you're less of a man because you're short, or because you're skinny, or all kinds of things, right? And yeah, I agree with you. I think that, yes, we do want to be accepted, and I think it's hard for people to genuinely be accepted if they're trying to be somebody that they're not. I think that there's something to be said for being authentic, but at the same time, I think that there's more than one way to kind of, it's like, find something that you can use to build discipline for yourself, right? For when times do get tough, because I find that there are very many people out there today that are faced with some type of adversity that just crushes them, right? And they're not prepared. They haven't been prepared to handle that level of stress. And sometimes it could be something as simple as a flat tire, right? And it just ruins their whole week. Like they're helpless in that situation. And I think that if you go and you seek out difficult things that force you to grow as a human being, that put you in situations that make you uncomfortable, then that prepares you for the inevitable times when life is going to get tough. And relationships are a huge part of that. Relationships are, they're a great tool to have in your kit, but if you don't have anybody, or if you have very few people in your life, you need to find other ways to make yourself strong. Reading a book, listening to a podcast. These are things that might cost you time and a little bit of money, but if you were to pay $20 for somebody's book, you could get their entire life experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can learn lessons invaluable lessons from books and podcasts and listening to, some of the other gentlemen that have been on your show, for example, and you can listen to and get strength from their stories, right? So, I mean, we have so many tools available at our disposal. It's just, you have to make the time. You have to make the time to invest in yourself, to strengthen yourself spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically.
Yep.
And that's kind of my take on it. I mean, yes, it's really important to have a support structure, but you need to seek other ways.
I agree.
It's a nuanced thing.
Absolutely. And that starts with building that structure way before you need it, right? And then not waiting and not cruising through life. And so one of the things I like also about, doing some research and getting ready for today, one of the things I like about that you talk about is talk about how motivation isn't always the answer. And so telling me a little bit more about what you mean by that, because a lot of people think that, well, if I just need to get motivated and then things will be different. But why do you say that?
Yeah, well, motivation is great, but sometimes it's there when you definitely don't need it. And what I'm trying to say about motivation is that it doesn't last, okay? And it's not something that you can rely on. And it might be there sometimes when you don't need it, right? Like, if you rely on motivation, then you're not going to achieve your goals. You're not going to do what you set out to do, because it's just fleeting. And some of the people who are greatest at what they do in this world, they don't rely on motivation. Yes, it's great, and yes, it's a boost, but it's the discipline that they've built. They rely on discipline because they go in there and they do the work regardless of the fact that maybe they don't feel like doing it. Maybe you're a professional athlete and you got a nagging knee injury, or something that's impeding you from performing at your absolute peak, but you have to get up and go put the work in regardless. Life circumstances are never going to be perfect. They're never going to line up just the way you want. And if you're sitting on the sidelines waiting for the perfect storm, you're going to be sitting there for your entire life. You're going to watch every opportunity go by because things weren't perfect, or they weren't just so. And that's true for anything, including, like, if you want to start your own business, if you want to get in shape, if you want to start eating properly, like, you have to take imperfect action daily. And that's why I think that it's important for people to have a rigid program and something that will highlight their negative habits, and it kind of exposes them, right? Because they're like, okay, well, let's say, for example, I don't have, everybody says this, I don't have time, right? I don't have time to go to the gym. I don't have time to eat properly, right? Well, we're a lot more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. So I'm not advocating that everybody gets up at 4 a.m. or something ungodly like 2:30 a.m. to make more time for themselves. But there is a benefit in getting up a little bit earlier. You can make a little bit more time for yourself, an extra 45 minutes, an extra hour, right? Or you designate a specific time or a specific day of the week where you're going to go to the gym, or where you're going to read 20 pages. And don't just skim through it to say, oh, I read the 20 pages, but you have an active strategy in place where, like, I'm going to read for 20 pages and I'm going to do it actively. I'll take notes and I'll highlight and I'll be engaged in the process, not just do it to do it.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're just going to go through the motions, you might as well not even do it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Adam. I think that's so important. You're absolutely right. And I like the comment of imperfect action. I was just speaking with some people actually yesterday about, there's a group of individuals that, struggle because not every piece of the puzzle has been laid out for them. And so what it requires is a little bit of thinking and a little bit of, trust. And so and I see this with lots of people. If they don't have all the steps figured out, then they don't take any action. And it's really about imperfect action, isn't it? It's about taking that step, moving forward. And then as you do that, that's how you learn and you adjust and you move on. I remember listening to, I think it was either Jack Canfield or one of those motivational guys 25 years ago. And they talked about how an airplane, from the time it leaves its one destination to get to the other, is off course like 95% of the time, right? It's constantly course correcting. And that's how our lives are. And we're constantly course correcting because it's just not a straight line from here to there.
Exactly. That's 100% right.
And one of the things you've already touched on, and you talked about how fitness, your love of fitness, and how that really helped really be a catalyst for you and move you through those challenging 2 years. And it was something that you had already built as part of who Adam is. So tell us about this Trainersize.me site that you have, what its mission is, your purpose, and how is it changing lives?
Yeah, so that's the platform that I use once I get clients who want to work with me. Basically, it allows them to have access to two-way communication with me and different types of exercises. And it's not my website per se, but I do host my own fitness program on there. But really, I like to try to engage with people as much as I can via Instagram. I think that it's a little bit more personal. They can see what I do on a day-to-day basis. They can see a little bit of what my blueprint looks like. And I think also it's important for people to see that I'm not just somebody who's here, preaching and not actually doing what I say. Like I live the words that I speak, because it's a part of who I am now. And it's been so tremendously beneficial for me. And it's something that I know got me through some seriously hard times, and I want to help other people. And if it worked for me, then it'll definitely work for other people. I'm not saying that it's going to work for everybody, but I mean, it's right for some people. And if it resonates with them, then I want them to get a hold of me and talk to me, and not just because they want to work with me, but like because I'll reach out anyway. Like if they're struggling with anything, I'm not the kind of person who's just gonna ignore that message coming in my inbox, right? So that's why I like the Instagram. I think that it's a way that I can communicate with people a little bit more openly.
Right on. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so with your program, obviously, fitness is important. You want to help people get to, they want to get into shape and all that, but what's really the philosophy and everything behind the work that you're doing? It's more than just the fitness aspect, I suspect. So what else makes this piece work for you and your clients?
Right. So, I mean, it's definitely mindset focused, right? And it's about developing a non-negotiable mindset. And one of the ways that we do that is through fitness, right? I mean, basically you put together a blueprint, or I've put together a blueprint, and it involves picking a wake up time, and you stick to that every day. And so you wake up and you earn the right to live that day. You've made it a conscious decision first thing in the morning, as soon as your eyes wake up, to get out of bed when you don't want to. So you've already started to build discipline before your feet even hit the floor, right? People don't like, I would rather stay in bed some mornings. Some mornings I get up and I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to rock. Other mornings I'm so comfortable under there. My dog hops up on the bed. He gives me a lick. He's like, hey, so we're just going to sleep in today? I'm like, no, we're going for it. Right. So one of the benefits there is that you build discipline immediately before you even freaking get out of bed,
Nice.
because you've made the choice to get up. And I think that that's extremely powerful. And then after that, I visualize and I journal. And when I journal, it's not just like, I journal about the things that didn't go right for me the day before. I journal about the things that I don't want to bring into my life tomorrow. Nice. Right. So I'm really conscious about those things. And it's like you said, we're always course correcting. I mean, I'm a human being just like anybody else, and I err. I make mistakes, but I'm conscious of the fact that I want to continually improve. And so it's important for me to put that down on paper, and it just makes me a little bit more present.
Yeah.
And after that, I go to the gym, because, a physical appearance and physical strength and being capable in your own body, so you can navigate this world that we live in to the best of your ability, is so important. It feels good to feel good. And on top of that, when you look good, you feel good, and it gives you confidence. And, it's a reflection of what's going on inside. It's a reflection of the fact that you care about yourself. It's a reflection of the fact that you're committed. It says a lot about you. When somebody sees that you're in shape, it says a lot about you. You're not just some gym rat, right? Like, I mean, like, and who cares if you are a gym rat? If that's what you love, that's what you love. Yeah. But, physical fitness, I think, especially today, is important for men and women. But I'm talking to the men here on this one. Like, we are living in a world where, masculinity is under attack, and where, people are obese, and people are, metabolically ill, and everybody's got some sort of autoimmune disorder. I mean, it's just physical fitness to me is one of the greatest forms of personal development, and for all the reasons that I just listed,
Yeah.
I think that it's super important, and I think that everybody needs to get at least some level of fitness in their life.
Completely agree. And great point about how, this change in mindset that's happening right before our very eyes. Like there's lots of, there's beauty in lots of different body shapes. There's somebody out there for somebody. I don't begrudge anyone, but the moment that we think that being obese is healthy, and that's kind of the narrative that's being portrayed in some of these larger magazines. And I think that's really dangerous for us to think that way, because if we feel that, and if we feel that being out of shape and being overweight, more overweight than what we truly should be, then society has a problem. And I was just saying this to a group of guys earlier this afternoon about how today, in today's world, we've become less resilient. There's a saying that says, hard times create strong men. Good times create weak men. Weak men create weak times. And that's just how that path goes. And because today, prior to COVID, what did we have to strive for? Like, we have first world problems here in North America. We're both Canadians here. I don't ever remember not having to be able to get something to eat. I always had some form of roof over my head. Like, we've got life easy. Our great grandparents, and maybe even our grandparents, depending on how old you are, they had it hard. They knew what real resilience is. And I think today, as men, as we're moving forward and reclaiming our masculine essence, and when I say that, I mean it's all aspects of it. It is about having that, taking that aggression and turning it into being assertive and taking steps forward, like you're doing with your work, especially around the fitness world, and how we embody all aspects of that. And I think that's really key for us moving forward. The other thing I wanted to ask you is that I noticed that you had this 60-40-20 workflow rule. Tell me what that's all about and how you deploy it.
Yeah. So essentially it might not work for everybody, but you apply it in whatever way, best suits you, to the extent that, like, if you're working in an office in a 9 to 5, right, and you're sitting down and you're exposed to all this, like unnatural blue light, and it starts to wear on you, right? You got to do something. You can't just stay sitting down all day. You got to get up, right? So you do 60 minutes of whatever the monotonous work is that you have to do. You get through that, and then you take a minute. You take a minute to reflect. You take a minute to do some breathing. Then you get back into it with some of the work that you enjoy a little bit more. So the 60, and then the 40, and then the 20. So the 40 would be the work that you enjoy a little bit more. And then 20 being, hey, let's take 20 minutes to do burpees or squats, or, jumping jacks or push-ups or something. Go to the stairwell and rip some flights of stairs, do something. Just break up your workday in the sense that, like, you're doing something for yourself. Okay. You're not just sitting there grinding it out all day, and then by the time you're done work, you don't have the energy to go to the gym. Maybe you can incorporate your whole fitness routine, like, I'm not saying the whole thing, but part of it, while you're at work. I mean, like, you still have to get up to go to the bathroom. What's to stop you from doing 20 push-ups when you get back to your office? And then if you did that throughout the course of the day, like, I mean, you could rack up a decent amount of sets and reps. So it's just kind of this idea that, and it's not written in stone, it's just this idea that, hey, listen, I mean, you don't have to conform to the norm. You can find a different way to approach your day and still be effective and still be successful, and probably more effective, because you've got more blood flow. Like, I mean, it's just a different way of approaching it.
Man, I love that. I really like that. What I like about it is that you're also rewarding yourself, right? You're doing the work you have to do. Then you're doing stuff that's a little more enjoyable, and you ultimately reward yourself by working on some things that are that you really enjoy. And in between all of that, you're incorporating some physical fitness. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I started asking this question lately because I'm really curious to hear what guys have to say about it. And so I'm going to ask you, what does legacy mean to you?
Legacy. You know, I want to have a family, and I want my legacy to be, that's a good question. I really haven't given much thought to legacy, but when you said it, my first thought was family.
Mhm.
And I guess family could be a legacy, but I want to raise, strong, happy, healthy, very capable children. And I just want to have a resilient, happy, healthy family. And I think that, I think that's tough today. I think that we're moving away from wanting to have families. I think that as a society, I think we're as a species we're moving away from being healthy. I think I just want something that's a little bit more traditional. Not to say that it has to be traditional. I just mean that I want to have a strong, happy, healthy family, and I want that to be the norm moving forward. So I want to play my part in that.
Love that. And
Yeah.
family is definitely legacy because there's so much, how what we imprint onto our children, ultimately becomes, a form of our legacy. And I think that's really cool. That was the first thing that popped in your head. It's awesome. Of everything that we spoke about today, and maybe there was one thing we didn't get around to talking about, what would be the one thing you'd want our listeners to remember?
That you can get out from underneath any issue that you're dealing with. There are people in this world that are out there that are willing to help you, that are looking to help you, and that the work that you put in instills the worth. I think the work instills the worth.
Love that. And you know what? That is outstanding. So I just want to say thank you so much, Adam, for spending time with me today. I think we left some breadcrumbs, a nice trail for people to be able to recognize and shed some light on that. We can make a different decision when we choose to reach out and get the help that we need. And then ultimately it leads to helping us make better life choices. If men are interested in getting a hold of you and get involved with your work, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way to get a hold of me is to find me on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is A Wells and then three underscores. And yeah, you'll find me there, and just shoot me a DM.
Perfect. I'm gonna make sure that information's in the show notes for today's episodes that people get an opportunity to reach out to you. I just want to say once again, thank you so much, bud. It was outstanding conversation.
Thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is the Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.